The night my brother showed up at my apartment, he wasn't wearing the confidence that used to enter rooms before he did. He was wearing rain. His expensive coat was soaked through. His hands were shaking. His phone kept buzzing in his pocket, over and over, like the whole world was hunting him. And the first thing he said to me, the brother who hadn't called in 8 months, was not, "How have you been?" It was, "Mira, I need money." I stared at him through the chain lock, my hand still on the door. This was Mark Vail, the golden son, the genius founder, the face of Unicorn X, the startup every business magazine called unstoppable. The same brother who once laughed in my face and asked how many paintings I needed to sell before I could afford real ambition. And now he was standing outside my door like a man whose empire had already turned to smoke. I should have closed the door. Instead, I opened it. That was my first mistake. Or maybe it was the beginning of the truth. Mark had always been the kind of person people believed in before he gave them a reason. He was brilliant, sharp, magnetic. In a room full of people, he didn't just get attention, he absorbed it. Teachers loved him, investors worshipped him. Our mother used to say he was born with sunlight on his face. I used to believe that too. When we were kids, Mark was the one who spoke for both of us. If I cried, he told people why. If I was afraid, he said not to worry because he'd take care of me. He made me feel safe back then. But some people grow out of kindness when success teaches them they don't need it. By 34, Mark had become a legend in the business world. Unicorn X was everywhere. Podcasts called him a visionary. Journalists called him the future. His company made impossible promises with beautiful presentations and glossy numbers that made investors dizzy with excitement. Growth, expansion, new markets, bigger valuations. No one asked whether the foundation was strong. No one wanted to. Because when a company is rising like a rocket, people don't ask if it has enough fuel. They just cheer at the fire. I watched it all from a distance, mostly through headlines and the occasional family dinner where Mark talked about scaling ecosystems and aggressive market capture, while barely looking at anyone else, least of all me. I was the younger sister with the small art shop. That's what he always called it. Never my gallery, never my business, never my company. Just my small art shop. He said it with a smile people mistook for affection, but I knew the cut beneath it. What Mark never bothered to learn was that my small art shop had grown into much more than a corner gallery selling watercolor prints to tourists. I had built a private network of artists, collectors, restorers, and licensing partners across 3 countries. I invested early in digital rights, estate holdings, and boutique cultural properties when everyone else thought art was soft and foolish. While Mark was chasing headlines, I was building assets no one noticed. Quiet money, patient money, the kind that doesn't scream, the kind that survives. He never asked, and I never told him. Maybe I wanted one thing in my life that wasn't measured against him. Maybe I was tired of being underestimated. Maybe I liked the silence. But silence has a price in families like ours. The last time Mark and I had a real conversation before that rainy night was at our mother's birthday dinner. He arrived late, with 2 assistants and the smell of expensive cologne. He hugged Mom with one arm while checking his phone with the other. Everyone forgave him immediately. They always did. At dessert, our cousin asked me how the gallery was doing. Before I could answer, Mark laughed. "She still calls it a gallery. That's cute." The whole table went still. I remember the heat rushing to my face. I remember Mom looking down at her plate like she hadn't heard it. I remember Mark leaning back in his chair, swirling wine, completely comfortable. "It's fine," he went on. "Not everyone is meant to build at scale." I forced a smile. "Not everyone is meant to survive at scale either." He smirked, like I was trying to be clever in a language only adults spoke. "Relax, Mira. I'm just saying. Some people make little handmade candles. Some people change the world." Everyone laughed nervously. I didn't. And then he said the sentence I never forgot. "If you ever need help doing something bigger with your life, ask me." I looked him in the eye and answered, If you ever need help staying human, ask me. He smiled like I'd proven his point. That was 8 months before he came to my door, drenched in rain and humiliation. I handed him a towel. He didn't take it. He paced my apartment instead, leaving wet footprints across the hardwood floor. "You live here?" he asked, glancing around. There it was. Even then, even broken, he still knew how to sound superior. He flinched, but only slightly. Good. He looked thinner than I remembered. His jaw was tense. There were dark circles under his eyes. Not the fashionable kind executives pretend are from hard work. The real kind. The kind that come from fear. "What happened?" I asked. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. What happened? Governance happened. Discipline happened. Reality happened. He dragged both hands over his face and finally sat down. Then the words started spilling out. The board was turning on him. A major funding round had collapsed. Internal audits were uncovering unauthorized spending, inflated growth projections, hidden liabilities. Their burn rate had gotten so bad the company was surviving on image and borrowed time. Senior executives were resigning, employees were whispering, reporters were digging. "They don't understand," he said. "You have to spend big to win big." "No," I said quietly. "You have to know when winning has become delusion." He ignored that. "We just needed another bridge round, another 6 months, that's it. But once one investor panicked, the others started circling. Now everyone's acting like I committed some crime." "Did you?" His eyes snapped to mine. For a second, I saw something in him I had never seen before. Not anger, not pride. Terror. "I need liquidity," he said. "Fast, personal, not institutional. Something clean, something I can use before the board freezes everything." I stared at him. "How much?" His answer landed between us like broken glass. 20 million. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, because it was the only sound my body could make. He looked offended. "I know how it sounds." "No," I said. "You really don't." He stood up. "Mira, I'm serious." "So am I. You mocked my life for years, and now you think I just have 20 million sitting under a paintbrush?" He swallowed hard. Then he said it. "I know about the money." The room went cold. I didn't move. "What?" "I know your shop isn't a shop. I know about the holdings, the licensing deals, the collector syndicates, the offshore restoration fund. I know you're worth more than I thought." My throat tightened. "How?" He didn't answer immediately. That's when I knew I wasn't going to like it. "How do you know, Mark?" He looked away, and in that silence, I understood before he even spoke. "You had someone look into me." His jaw clenched. "I was being careful." "You investigated me?" "I was trying to save my company." "No," I snapped. "You were trying to figure out whether your embarrassing little sister was secretly useful." He stood there, breathing hard, saying nothing. That silence was all the confession I needed. I felt something in me crack. Not because he knew, because he hadn't found out by caring. He had found out by hunting. He begged that night. Mark Vale, the man who once couldn't say my name without sounding like he was correcting a mistake, begged. He said he could pay me back. He said it was temporary. He said if Unicorn X survived, I'd be protecting thousands of jobs. He said family should matter more than old wounds. Then he played the cruelest card of all. Mom would want you to help me. I stood so fast my chair scraped the floor. "Don't do that." His voice dropped. "She's sick, Mira." "I know she's sick." "No, you know she's tired. You don't know everything." My heart stopped. "What are you talking about?" His face changed. The arrogance fell away for one awful second, and I saw the boy he used to be. "Mom has heart failure," he said. "Advanced. She didn't want you worrying." The room tilted. I grabbed the kitchen counter to steady myself. "Since when?" "She was diagnosed last year." Last year. A whole year. Everyone knew but me. "Who is everyone?" He said nothing. I whispered, "You knew, and you didn't tell me." She made me promise. "You always keep promises when they protect your control." "That's not fair." I laughed through tears. "Fair? You want fair now?" I couldn't breathe. My mother was dying, my brother was desperate, and somehow I was still the last person told. I looked at him and saw the full shape of my life in one terrible instant. He had not just underestimated me, he had edited me out. I didn't give him the money that night. I told him to leave. He stood at my door for a long time, like he was waiting for me to remember I loved him more than I loved my pride. But love is not obedience, and grief is not alone. Before he walked out, he turned and said, "If the company dies, it won't just take me down." I wanted to ask what that meant. I should have asked, but I was too busy shaking. So he left, and for the first time in years, I cried for my brother. Not because I thought he was innocent, because I finally saw how small he was underneath all that height. The next morning, I went to see our mother. She looked smaller, too. That was the first thing that broke me. My mother had always seemed built from something stronger than the rest of us. Even after losing our father, even after raising 2 children who turned out to be strangers to each other, she had carried herself like a woman who did not collapse. Now she looked fragile in a way that made me want to turn back time with my bare hands. "Mira," she smiled, as if I were the one who had been gone. "You look tired." I sat beside her bed and took her hand. "You were going to tell me when?" I asked. Her smile faded. So she knew what I knew now. She closed her eyes. "I didn't want to become the center of the family." "You are the family." A tear slipped down her cheek. "No, I was trying to keep what was left of it together." I wanted to be angry, but seeing her there, all I felt was pain. "Did Mark ask you to stay quiet?" She hesitated. That was enough. I nodded slowly. "Of course he did." "He said the company was under pressure," she whispered. "He said if you knew, you'd panic. He said he would fix everything first." I almost laughed at the tragedy of that. Mark, fixing everything. Mark, who thought love meant deciding what other people could bear. Then Mom squeezed my hand weakly and said, "He's in trouble, isn't he?" I didn't answer. "Mira," she said, "whatever he has done, don't let hatred choose for you." Hatred. That word stayed with me. Because the truth was, I didn't hate Mark. I hated that some part of me still wanted to save him. 3 days later, Unicorn X was all over the news. Anonymous insiders leaked documents. Journalists published stories about reckless expansion, toxic leadership, phantom revenue optimism, and a culture where no one was allowed to say no to Mark. The phrase that kept appearing in headlines was brutal. Growth without governance. Another phrase came right behind it. Weak discipline. Investors fled. Employees protested. The board announced an emergency review. A regulator opened an inquiry. His face was everywhere. The same face once printed beside words like genius and visionary was now paired with words like collapse, scandal, ego. I watched the coverage in silence from my office while one of my managers quietly placed tea beside me. "You okay?" she asked. "No," I said, "but thank you." Then my lawyer called, and everything got worse. "Mira," she said carefully, "we need to talk about your brother." That is never a sentence that ends well. She told me records suggested Mark had used shell intermediaries tied to one of Unicorn X's side ventures to quietly acquire short-term credit exposure connected to one of my art logistics partners. I blinked. "I don't understand." "He may have tried to leverage your business ecosystem without your knowledge." The tea in my hand went cold. "Is that legal?" "Some parts may be, some parts may not. But there's more." There always is. He listed an anticipated personal family backstop in private conversations with lenders. I went still. "Meaning?" meaning he implied family wealth existed to support him. My voice came out as a whisper. He used me. Yes. I closed my eyes. Not asked. Used. Even before the rain. Even before the begging. He hadn't come to me as a brother first. He'd come because one of his lies had finally run out of road. I went to see him that evening. Not at his penthouse. That had already been left to lawyers and silence. He was in a private office borrowed from some friend who still hadn't accepted he was contagious. He looked exhausted, but when he saw me, hope flickered in his eyes. That hurt more than if he'd looked ashamed. I knew you'd come, he said. I shut the door behind me. You leveraged my name. His face drained. Mira, you used my financial existence as a safety net without my permission. I was trying to buy time. You investigated me, concealed Mom's illness, and used my assets as a rumor to keep your fantasy alive. His voice sharpened. It was not a fantasy. It was a lie wearing expensive shoes. He slammed his hand on the desk. You think you're better than me because your money is quieter? I think I sleep at night. He laughed bitterly. Do you? You built an empire in shadows and call it dignity. At least mine can stand sunlight. That landed. He looked at me for a long moment, breathing hard. Then something in him collapsed. Not the CEO, my brother. I was drowning, he whispered. The anger in me faltered. He sat down slowly, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Do you know what it feels like? He said. To have everyone cheer for you only as long as you keep climbing? To know the minute you slow down, they start looking for your replacement? I built that company with nothing. Everyone wanted more, faster, bigger. Every investor meeting, every board dinner, every interview, they didn't want discipline. They wanted a miracle. So I kept performing one. And when the miracle ended? He looked up at me, eyes red. I didn't know who I was without it. There it was. The terrible human truth beneath all the damage. He had become addicted not to money, but to worship. And worship is the hungriest thing in the world. I sat down across from him. I could have helped you, I said quietly. He froze. Not with 20 million, not like this, but I could have told you how to stop before the cliff, how to cut, how to survive small, how to be embarrassed and live. He gave a broken laugh. You think I didn't know that? Then why didn't you? His answer came so softly I almost missed it. Because I couldn't bear the thought that you were right. I looked at him and felt my heart shatter in a completely different way. Not because he had betrayed me. Because all this ruin had grown from something so petty, so human, so ugly. Pride. He would rather burn in public than be saved in private by the sister he looked down on. I left that office knowing I would not save Unicorn X. Some things deserve rescue. Some things need to collapse. But families are not companies. That was the part I still couldn't untangle. So I made a different choice. I moved our mother into a private care facility and paid for everything myself. I did it quietly. No press, no speeches, no family group messages. Just signatures, doctors, nurses, and a room with enough light for her favorite orchids. Mark found out 2 days later. He came to see her while I was there. For a moment, the three of us sat in that room like a version of our family that had never learned how to speak honestly. Mom reached for both our hands and placed them together. Even then, even dying, she was still trying to build a bridge between two collapsing shores. Promise me, she whispered, when I go, you won't turn each other into graves. I started crying immediately. Mark looked like someone had punched the air out of his chest. We promise, I said. He didn't answer. Mom turned to him. Mark. His lips trembled. I promise. It was the first sincere thing I had heard from him in years. Mom died 12 days later, and at the funeral, the final twist arrived. It came in the form of a letter. Our lawyer handed it to us after the burial, her expression unreadable. "It's from your mother," she said, "to be opened together." Mark and I sat in her empty living room, still in black, still smelling of rain and flowers and loss. My hands shook as I unfolded the pages. Her writing was weaker than I remembered, but still unmistakably hers. She wrote about love first, then regret, then the truth neither of us had seen coming. Our father had not left his estate to Mark, as everyone in the family believed. He had split it equally between us. But years ago, when Mark was first raising money for his startup, our mother had secretly signed over her control of his portion early to help him build his company. She had offered me the same with my share. I had refused and insisted mine be left untouched. At the time, I'd thought she simply respected my caution. But that wasn't all. There was one final paragraph, one that made Mark go pale before I even finished reading aloud. If Mark's company collapsed due to fraud, gross negligence, or misuse of fiduciary duty, a dormant protective clause in a family trust would activate, and control of the remaining family estate, property, reserves, and voting rights over several legacy holdings would pass entirely to me. Not temporarily, entirely. The room went silent. Mark stared at me as if he were seeing me for the first time in his life. "No," he said. "That's impossible." I looked at the lawyer's attached documents. It wasn't. Our father had built the clause decades ago after watching his own brother destroy a business through vanity and debt. He had written protections for the child who preserves what is real over what is admired. He had never named which child that would be, but somehow he knew one day it would matter. Mark stood up so suddenly the chair tipped over. "So that's it?" he choked out. "She knew? She knew this could happen?" I looked at the letter again, tears blurring the words. At the very end, our mother had written, "I did not tell you because I prayed you would choose each other before money chose for you." I couldn't speak. Mark backed away, shaking his head. "All this time," he said, "you were never the poor sister." "No," I whispered. "I was the sister you never bothered to see." And then my brother, the man who had once commanded rooms, sank to the floor of our mother's living room and sobbed like a child. Not for the company, not for the money, for the years, for the blindness, for the love he kept stepping on because he thought it would always stay. I knelt beside him, and after everything, I put my arms around him. Because some endings are not about who wins, they are about who is left to bury the wreckage. Unicorn X officially filed for restructuring 3 weeks later. Mark resigned under pressure. Several executives were investigated. Some settled, some disappeared. The company survived in fragments under new leadership, smaller and humbler than the myth it once sold. The business press moved on, as it always does. A new founder, a new promise, a new fire for people to clap at. But in private, the real aftermath was slower. Mark stopped giving interviews. He started visiting our mother's grave every Sunday. Then one day he asked if he could come see my gallery, my real gallery. Not because he needed money, not because he needed cover, just to see it. I said yes. He walked through the rooms quietly, stopping in front of a painting made of repaired canvas stitched with gold thread along the tears. "What's this one called?" he asked. "Visible mending." He stared at it for a long time. "That sounds like you," he said. I almost smiled. "It could sound like you too, if you let it." He nodded, eyes wet. That was the first day I believed redemption might be a discipline too. Not a feeling, not a speech. A discipline. A choice repeated until it becomes a life. And the shocking part? Months later, when Mark finally began working again, it wasn't as a CEO. It was as an advisor helping collapsed founders unwind their companies before they destroyed everyone around them. No spotlight, no magazine covers, No worship, just consequence, just truth, just work. As for me, I kept the estate, but I used part of it to create a foundation in our mother's name, funding small businesses with strong governance, ethical growth, and founders smart enough to hear the word no. Because empires built on applause will always beg eventually, and because sometimes the person everyone calls small is the only one strong enough to survive the fall. The last thing Mark ever said to me about money was on the anniversary of Mom's death. We were standing by her grave, wind moving softly through the trees, when he looked at me and said, "You know what hurts the most?" I thought he meant losing the company. He didn't. "I spent my whole life trying to become someone important," he said. "And all along, the richest thing in my life was the sister I kept treating like she was nothing." I cried then, not because it fixed everything, because it didn't. Because some apologies arrive after the damage and are still real. Because love is strange enough to break your heart twice, once when it is betrayed, and again when it returns. And because in the end, my brother's startup did collapse from growth without governance, from weak discipline, from arrogance dressed up as ambition. But that wasn't the real tragedy. The real tragedy was that he almost lost his family the exact same way. And unlike a company, not every family can be rebuilt after that. Ours barely was. Which is why every time someone calls my business a small art shop, I just smile. Because I know something they don't. Small things survive, and sometimes they save what the giants destroy.
Select now another video in our series of family and company dramas. They are all powerful stories of people coming back stronger after they have been humiliated or hurt by family members or their management. Always make sure you stay strong. Let nobody ever tell you what you are worth. You know the best. Of course.